but there are these skeletons that are still following you.
And of course, this, as you see on your screens, these are just some of the numbers as things stand right now. So critical to note, it's just where we are now. This is not the final outcome, and we are still quite a long way to go. But Prof, you know, we listened to Thapelo raising a very important point around the state capture report. It raises a broader question on the commissions that we've seen, the reports that we've seen. Some gather dust, others you see you know, an effort of implementing some, not all, of the recommendations. What do South Africans then make of that? Do we still even need these commissions?
I think some of the election results are exactly reflecting what South Africans are making of it, because South Africans came into the CYRIL Ramaphosa term as president with high expectations of definitive action, of cleanups happening, and didn't quite bargain on getting a president who got bogged down into, can he fire this person, can he take disciplinary action, can he suspend, can there be a step aside, heaven knows all of the different options. And overall he came
a broader reflection of the general dissatisfaction around political institutions in the country.
And as you say, of course, quite interesting and important to note is the fact that, of course, this is the result as it stands now. Hasn't been called. Anything can change. It's still too early in the game. But let me stay with something that you said. The difficulty that the former Secretary General had in some parts when we saw on the campaign trail, some very difficult questions arising about some very serious governance issues as well in some parts in the Free State.
Look, there's a lot that he has to answer to. We saw the state capture report. Of course, there's been, unfortunately, a bungling of the asbestos case again in the Free State by the National Prosecuting Agency. That's disappointing. Of course, I think there needs to be some level of capacity put onto that thing. But we'll see it now with a different version or iteration now of the Scorpions that has been promulgated there. But again, I think Ace Magashule has quite a lot of cases to answer to. And we are seeing that the prosecutorial agencies have brought back some of the witnesses from the United States to come back and give some sort of evidence to, at least in that case, to strengthen that case. But certainly doesn't just speak to him. It speaks to a whole host of us. So ANC members still inside, and some have left, some have gone to different political organizations that still must face issues around corruption. So we are going to see a lot more of that than the narrative around, well, yes, you're a new political party.
And as a coalition part, they probably not be, I would not say. You know, it's so difficult for a small political party, irrespective of who they are, to make a stand, to get its weight spread across different committees, to participate in all the different legislative processes. And yes, there are the occasions, and small parties have been treated reasonably well. I think they can be treated also better in the next parliament in terms of speaking time. But they do get speaking time to make big ethical statements and good speeches, etc. And I think they could have done better on that front.
How much of a difference do they make, though, then, listening to what you say?
A very small difference. They have been voting alliance fodder in general political, party political alliances that form around legislation, particular votes and debates in Parliament. I think they pulled their weight as part of that informal kind of alliance in there. But as autonomous party, they were just too small and poorly defined in parliamentary politics.
So, Doc, if we then have a bit more of them, does it change what Prof is saying, or is it still more of the same?
Members of the party. Look, I think at the parliamentary, at least in terms of the parliamentary work of Parliament, I think it would be very difficult for them to sort of have a bigger voice.
Indeed, I am joined by Ngabayom Singwangwa just to reflect as the numbers continue to come in, just how they're feeling as UDM. Mr. Ngwangwa, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Susan. Thank you for having us.
No, it's a pleasure. Your view on just what we're seeing on the leaderboard currently insofar as the UDM's performance?
Well, so far so good. We have no complaints whatsoever, simply because the regions where we know that are our strongholds, especially in the Eastern Cape, the results for those regions haven't come true yet. And what we did our own analysis of the results, looking at different regions in the Eastern Cape to try and make sense of that 21,000, for example, that we have on the board currently. And we picked up that there's growth everywhere. growth in those regions. And if we can make sure that we grow even in the regions like your Amatola region, the OR Tambo region, we can experience growth, for example, even in Buffalo City Municipality and so on, then we'll know that we are well on our way to actually improving on the last elections performance, which is what we're focusing on. Because remember, in these elections, we focused in particular on trying to secure our base before we grow elsewhere in the country.
But then if we had to look at the Eastern Cape, which is your strongest base or stronghold for the UDM, it's currently at 2.2%, placing you fourth, ANC's first, DA, EFF, and then you're fourth. And you're saying that, yes, there is some sort of an improvement. What of those analysts that say the pace is too slow?
Well, it's simply because the OR Tambo region, as I have mentioned, Amatola region are not in yet. The pace, it's the counting pace that is slow and not necessarily the growth of the party that is slow. Because if you were to look at the different, I'll encourage them to zoom into the regions, the performance, what we did in 2019 versus how we're faring now. While the votes are still being counted in 2024, they are going to pick up growth, which means the campaign we mounted in the Eastern Cape in particular, especially us declaring the president as the premier candidate for that province, has worked. All that we are going to need to do now is to build on that in trying to make sure that we have representation in other provinces as well.
All right, Mr. Nkwankwa, thank you very much for your time this evening. That's the UDM's Ngabayomzi Nkwankwa speaking to us, quite confident that at the very least at the Eastern Cape, they will get a sizable amount of the votes, and most certainly, according to him, there will be significant growth. What we're witnessing here, according to him, is just the slow pace of counting. So we'll take it back to you, Bongiwe, in the main studio.
Thank you very much, Mfundo. It's very interesting that, he says the counting pace is what is slow, not the growth of the party. So I'm putting that to both of you. Do you agree with that statement, starting with you, Prof?
No, I don't. I've heard so many parties in interviews from the floor here this afternoon claim that it's just the pace and the positioning of the available counting that doesn't show that they're actually growing parties. And so we do not think so. It will be very, very difficult for this party to grow. Like on the board, there is quite a range of existing parties. Also think of the PAC, AZAPO, etc. Good. They are.
Let's stay with some of the developments of what we've seen. Interestingly, also, looking at the Free State and what Makhala was talking about there, and we do have in studio with us political analyst Dr. Tapelo Tselapedi and Professor Susan Boyson, who are talking to us about, of course, what we continue to see. So thank you so much to you both. And interestingly, I'm going to start with you, Prof. I mean, you look at the Free State, and we just saw, of course, this is a province. When you saw in the past, as Makhala is talking, is that there was an ANC, a DA, EFF, and FF Plus presence. Right now, there is, of course, the former Premier, who was also the former Secretary General of the ANC, Esma Khashula, who is leading ACT. Listening to the party agent there, she says that they're quite happy because for them, it's been just 9 months of campaigning. Let's look at that dynamic there.
Yes, there was certainly 9 months of campaigning, not always of a high profile. We saw them, now we didn't, and we had a sense that they lacked resources and just didn't reach much more than the northern Free State areas where the former Premier's strongholds are. And so it's been an uneven campaign, and I'm not surprised that they are seemingly not faring very well.
And Doc, when one looks at, of course, what we saw previously, and you look at the results before, as Makhala says, it would be, the ANC, it would be the DA, it would be the EFF in the province of the Free State, as they've seen in the past. But now, looking at the dynamic, is that likely to change? Possibly.